you, Holly. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I am excited to be anywhere after these last 5 months, okay? And let's be honest, it's been challenging times for everybody. So today, I thought I would just lighten the mood. I thought maybe we could talk about your uncle's political stance to the virus and whether wearing masks is an effective strategy. Who's excited? No, I'm just joking. I don't want to do any of that. That sounds awful. But I will admit, it is kind of interesting to me that something as small as wearing a mask and so many other very, very small things in life are what are pushing us apart from each other. We have a tendency as humans to let very tiny differences drive wedges through us. And even though those differences get more attention, I've been working my entire career in and with companies to help people realize that we're a lot more similar than we are different. I've talked about the generational issue in the past, the baby boomers versus those pesky millennials in my talk, Stop Acting Your Age, which is a hilarious, high-energy, fun-filled approach to solving a problem that we have been unsuccessfully dealing with for 20 years. I've also worked with leaders to help them understand that they are more than some personality test. In my talk, You're Not an Acronym, because leadership isn't even about us, the leader. It's about the people we lead. And again, we're a lot more similar than we are different. And while I still do those talks today I'm excited to share with you a portion of my newest presentation, which is called The Human Way, the 4 truths to making your business human. And in this post-COVID world that we're living in right now, it is now more important than ever that we understand and recognize that there are some widely held, common motivating factors to human behavior that we need to understand if we want to gain and keep customers, retain talent, and lead in a more humane way. Because the organizations which succeed in the future are not the ones that are going to be spending all their time arguing and talking about how to sell more products and services at a higher margin, but rather it's going to be the organizations which understand the common needs and motivations that govern all employee and customer behavior. They're not different, they're the same. And the organizations which understand and honor and harness what it means to be human will be the ones that outperform their peers when it comes to creating an amazing culture and true employee engagement. But first, let me back up a little bit, okay? Because somewhere along the way, we got away from being human with each other. Something happened, and it's not entirely our fault. Because back in the 1990s, we got introduced to easily the most fascinating, magical, life-changing invention of all time. And no, I know what you're thinking, it's not the 2G cell phone, okay? It's also not the DVR. Both invented in the 90s, really awesome, and I get a ton of pleasure of watching my 6-year-old daughters have to watch a commercial these days. The shock on their face is absolutely amazing, okay? But no, right, back in the 1990s, we got introduced to the internet, and practically overnight, we got this ability to share and consume information with anybody across the world in an instant, like that. Small correction, it actually took 8 minutes to load. But after that, then we got the ability to share information across the world, and the technology continues to get better and better, and our access to information continues to expand to the point where now today, every day, we're uploading 2 million articles of information on the web each day. Every day, we're sending 100 million photos and videos just on Instagram, and every day we're sending out over 500 million tweets. That is a tremendous amount of information and misinformation for our brains to handle. I mean, can you imagine how many volumes of Encyclopedia Britannicas it would take for just 1 day's worth of information in 2020? Some of you young people in the room and online, you don't even know what an encyclopedia is, and I feel bad for you. You never got to experience the sheer terror of having to look up information in a book. You just get to, hey Siri, all of life's questions. And, okay, quite frankly, that sounds awesome. I'm maybe just jealous. I'm not even mad at you. But look, I do want to be careful about something. I am not an anti-internet, anti-technology person. It's quite the opposite. I believe the internet has made our lives easier in countless ways. This internet created the ability for us, the best part of it was this ability to create smaller communities in an increasingly larger world. You could find your voice online, for good or for bad. I mean, literally, people like Justin Bieber had their voice found on the internet where it would have been impossible without. So that remains the best part about the internet, this ability to connect, to create, and to amplify the positive. But amongst all the good of the internet, my point is that it also overwhelmed our brain's ability to handle the massive amounts of information. And this is not my opinion. This is an undisputed fact proven by a concept called Dunbar's number. Now let me explain Dunbar's number to you here really quick. It is a central thesis for a lot of my work. But Dunbar's number was a result of research that began in the 1990s by a British philosopher named Robin Dunbar, whose goal was to answer the question, how many human beings can another person care about at any given time? So I like to think of it as how many people can you put in your brain at once and keep track of? And Dunbar found out that number to be 150 people. Now I do want to be careful about the word care, because I believe that regardless of whether or not I have a physical or emotional relationship with you, I should care about you. I don't know everybody in the room or online, but I should care about you. I should want to see you happy, successful, and live a fulfilling life. So there's no limit to the number of people I believe we can care about. But in Dunbar's research, when he looked at care, he was talking about those emotional, intimate connections that you create, the types of people that you'd invite to a retirement party or a birthday party or share life's events. So don't confuse the intent on it, but the idea is that we all have about 150 people that we're looking for, and that's baked in centuries worth of data. So we know from archaeological records that a Neolithic farming village was the size of 150 people. We know from county records that an 18th century English parsonage was 150 people big. We know that the average size of a Roman military company was 150, and the average size of an American military company is about 160. Now, the largest wedding anybody's ever been to has probably been about 300 people. So that's 150 for each marrying spouse. And Facebook actually did this study, that regardless of the number of friends that you have in your friend network, you tend to only interact with 150 of them. That's why Facebook changed their algorithm, and that's all you see now. So what that says to me is that there's a ton of evidence to suggest that all of us, regardless of age, where we are in life, we're out in search for about 150 people to connect to make us feel like we belong to something. And if we simplify that concept even further, then it means our brains are actually wired for only a small number of people. But let's compare that mental architecture then to the world at which we create every day, to the millions of people and photos and videos. The goal of the human way is to recognize that we are playing a different game today than we even had to play 20 or 10 years ago. The internet has us thinking on this global level, thinking in terms of millions and billions of people, users, and brand advocates, but our brains haven't changed. Our brains are still local. They think in terms of dozens or hundreds. And so when we have to think globally or even operate in today's world, we're actually going against the way that our brain is designed, and it creates some problems. The human way is my attempt to reconcile some of those problems and to illustrate the fact that we are a lot more similar than we are different, to solve some of the problems that this global world creates by recognizing that there are still some basic human qualities that we all share. In the full presentation, I'll walk audiences through what I call the 4 human truths, the 4 critical components to understand if we want to lead our teams and organizations the human way. Now, I've explained a little bit about the why I think this is important and why it's more needed now than ever. But I do want to, since we only have 12 minutes, I just want to share with you a snippet of some of the takeaways so you also get a sense for the type of message that your audience would walk away with. And when we talk about the truths, one of the human truths that we talk about is our inherent struggle with and our perception of time. Because time can impact, and our perception of time can impact our behavior and the behavior of people around us. Case in point, show of hands in the room or online. Parents, anybody a parent in this room? Okay, and if you're not a parent, don't worry. I think you can follow along even if you haven't experienced this. You can probably believe me when I say this, that when you are a parent, especially with young children, your days are long. So unbelievably long. But the years are short. And if you ask any parent whose kids are now out of the house for parenting advice, they will tell you things like, oh, cherish the younger years. Little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems, which I think is funny and interesting because in my own life, just recently, one of my daughters decided to go on a 3-month sleep strike. And let me tell you, when I was going through that, it was not a little kid, little problem. I wasn't cherishing those moments. It was a big problem. So much so that I tried to sell her on eBay, but apparently that is against their terms of agreement. I'm just joking. I didn't do that, but I did look at options, okay? So my point is, regardless of where you are in life, we all have to go through the ebbs and flows of our relationship with time. We have to live with speed and urgency for the now because we don't know what we're promised tomorrow. But we also have to live with patience to understand what long-term plans and what's going to happen in the future. As leaders and in our organizations, it's critical to understand the balance that is needed here. You are going to have to work at 2 speeds at once. You don't get the option anymore. Because the leaders in organizations which fail are the ones that ignore the balance that is needed and sacrifice one for the other. In the longer talk, I'll walk audiences through examples that they can relate to. Examples like Blockbuster, or who remembers Farmville in the room? Yeah, exactly, right? So these are both cautionary examples of what happens when you tip the scales one way or the other. One was resting on their laurels and gave no moment to the now and focusing on where the market was going, while others can run too fast and have no plan for the future. The million-dollar question that we have to ask ourselves is how do we strike the appropriate balance? And that answer is certainly going to depend upon the audience and, more importantly, the individual. But the answer is a question about priorities. Being human is about giving priority to our time here. Because trust me, you can go through life and you will get through it. I promise you that. Or you can give priority to the important parts and give them the time that they deserve. It's the first question that I ask leaders when we start talking about this truth. I'll say, how are you prioritizing your time? And after we get through the surface level answers and we get down to the honesty, I get examples like this. Well, my calendar, my meetings, or my favorite is, I don't know. I never even thought of it that way. Great leaders give time to their people, to others, to the right now and to the future. So the question I will leave you with here today, with the time that we have left on this earth, is how are you going to make progress right now on your right now plan? The things that are important at this moment while you continuously make progress towards your patient's plan. How are you prioritizing your time? And once we know that question and once we work with audiences to understand their base, then we can figure out how do those priorities match with their customers, with their employees, and maybe in their personal life. Now look, if COVID-19 has done anything positive, and I'm not sure it has, it's at least provided us an example. Because back in March, when this thing all hit and everybody was under lockdown orders, and we were running 1,000,000 miles a minute trying to figure out how do you work from home and how do we homeschool children, we also very quickly reimagined where our priorities should be. Because pretty much overnight, neighborhoods were filled with families walking around the block, spending time together, talking. You saw employers go the extra mile to make sure that their employees were okay during this time of chaos. And the great leaders stopped worrying about the next meeting, the next deadline, and they checked on their people. We focused on each other. And that is the greatest lesson that we can take from this, and one that I hope that we don't forget. Now look, I wish that we had more time to talk. There's a lot more that we talk about in the human way, about how we build community, how we focus on purpose, how we embrace failure so that we can use it to reject fear. And so up on the screen, you'll see a list of some of the takeaways that you'd get from a full presentation. But in anything that I do, my goal is to simplify the conversation, to recognize that we are a lot more similar than we are different. So let's stop putting people in boxes, and let's start leading our teams and organizations the human way. Thank you so much for your time today. Angela, thank you for putting this together. Thank you online for watching, and everybody have a great rest of your day.